So how did you make this discovery?
Well, it's interesting. I wasn't looking for it. I was aware that the Narnia books were a bit mysterious, and I'd been studying Lewis for many years, and I read lots of works of criticism by different critics, many of whom had suggested, the Narnia books are based on the 7 deadly sins, or the Narnia books are based on the 7 sacraments, or the Narnia books are based on the 7 books of Spenser's Fairy Queen. All sorts of theories had been suggested, because a lot of critics were aware that the Chronicles didn't very obviously have a pattern or a sense of coherence to them. Lots of critics had dismissed the books as a hodgepodge or a mishmash. And so there was this question out there in the world of Lewis scholarship. Why did Lewis write the books the way that he did? When I came to do my PhD, I started studying a different aspect of C.S. Lewis altogether. I wasn't looking at the Narnia books, I was looking actually at his understanding of the word. So I'd spent a year or so looking at this idea of wordless communication, saying something without saying it. And halfway through the second year of my research, two things happened. First of all, a good friend of mine, Chris Homewood, gave to me the soundtrack of the Royal Shakespeare Company's production of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, which I'd seen on stage and loved, and I thought it was great. And here was the soundtrack, the songs and the music that accompanied this stage production.
No words.
A few words, a few songs, but a lot of just background music as well. So I listened to this for a week or so. I kind of had it on repeat, like you do when you get a new piece of music. And although I wasn't aware of this at the time, looking back, I now realise that by kind of attuning myself to the musicality of the story as it was interpreted on this soundtrack, I was beginning to think about the story in a different way. I wasn't just looking at the words on the page, I was listening to the spirit coming through the words on the page.
Atmosphere, yeah.
The atmosphere, the flavour, the quality, the tone, the key, the musical key, if you like. And it's interesting, talking about musical imagery with respect to literary motifs, that Lewis often made a link between the two. He said that in a good fairy tale, it's always the symphonic use of the imagery that counts. So anyway, I'd spent a week listening to The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe treated musically. And then on a particular date in February, I think it was 2003, I went and had a meeting with a retired bishop called Simon Barrington Ward, no relation of me. And he knew C.S. Lewis quite well. Simon, had been chaplain of Magdalen College, Cambridge, when Lewis was there as professor. And the two men had gone walking together, and they spoke together at quite a deep level, even though Simon was young and Lewis was old back in the 1950s. So anyway, Simon helped me understand what this meant, and he did so by very roundabout means, as it happened. He took a book off his shelf and read aloud to me an exchange between two Orthodox monks.
Is that a left field?
Yeah, really out of left field. There's this senior monk and this junior monk. And the senior one is very wise and godly and learned, and the young one is very humble and simple. And the young monk says to the old monk, how is it, do you think, that the perfect speak? And the older monk, he had half a dozen answers ready to hand, because he was learned and godly and wise. But he somehow sensed that he was missing a trick, and rather than offer his own answers, he said, I don't know, you tell me. And it was a genuine question. And the younger monk says, in reply, the perfect never say anything of themselves. They only say what the Spirit suffers them to say. And anyway, as Simon Barrington Ward read aloud this passage to me, it made a tremendous impact on me. The perfect never say anything of themselves. They only say what the Spirit suffers them to say. The idea being that in prayer, you allow the Holy Spirit to speak through you. You don't just conjure up a lot of empty words, to batter God's ears with your own articulacy. If you want to speak to God, you've got to
be led by the Spirit of God.
By the Spirit of God to say what it is that needs to be said. The Spirit intercedes for us with groans that are too deep for words, according to St. Paul in the letter to the Romans. And I heard this many times. I was training for the ministry. I've been a Christian for many years, and I kind of knew all this intellectually. But for the first time, it made a real impact on me at a deeper level. And I went back to my college in a bit of a daze with this new sense of, what really does it mean to allow the Spirit to speak through you? And anyway, that night, I was lying in bed, I was preparing to go to sleep, and I was reading Lewis's book, The Discarded Image, as part of my research, and I was reading the chapter all about the heavens and how medieval people understood the heavens. And it occurred to me that I should compare and contrast Lewis's academic treatment of this with his poetic treatment of the same thing, because he wrote a long poem called The Planets, in which he gives his own version of the planetary characteristics. So I was already doing a bit of cross-referencing between different aspects of Lewis's work. And when I got to the lines in the poem, to the passage connected with Jupiter, one of the things that the poem says that Jupiter brings about is winter past and guilt forgiven. Just those 5 words kind of leapt off the page at me. Winter past and guilt forgiven. And I did a double take and thought, I've come across this elsewhere in Lewis's writings. This is, if you like, a 5-word summary of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. Winter past and guilt forgiven. The White Witch's winter passes and Edmund's guilt is forgiven. So that was what kind of made the light bulb go on for me, if you like. Just those 5 words. And I began to tug on this loose thread, and the whole tapestry began to unravel in front of me, if you like. And it was very exciting, because, as I say, I thought I knew these books, and here was a whole new level of significance to them, beautifully and artistically woven into the warp and the woof of these stories. And thanks to Simon Barrington Ward, thanks to my friend Chris Homewood, I was able, to be in just the right place at just the right time to see this, and it kind of revolutionised my PhD. I had to throw out of the window all the work I'd been doing up to that point, and I spent the next year rereading everything Lewis ever wrote in order to understand exactly how he thought of the planets whenever he referred to them. And I mean, I know people say that, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But it didn't feel as if I was having to force anything. I didn't have to make it fit here, it just fell into place. Click, 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 all over Lewis's work. Not just the Narnia books, but his academic work, his poetry, his letters, where he often talks about unusual conjunctions of the planets that he's seen.
And his life.
His whole life was infused with this love of the planets. Right from an early age, he said that the idea of other planets exercised a peculiar and heady attraction for me.
And he looked at stars just out here.
Yes, he looked at the stars from this very window of his bedroom. And he had a telescope on the balcony out there. And so, as an amateur astronomer, as a literary historian, as a poet, as a novelist, the Ransom trilogy of interplanetary adventures, he's been immersing himself in this symbolism for years, for decades. And the ripe fruit of that immersion was the Narnia books.